The Andromedan Nebula glowed with the light of dying stars as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled for what many believed would be civilization's final battle against the backdrop of cosmic fire. Thousands of warships from dozens of species formed battle lines that stretched across millions of kilometers. The Void Swarm had built their ultimate manufacturing facility here in the heart of the nebula, where radiation would interfere with most weapons and sensors' intelligence. Reports indicated that the mechanical enemy had learned from their defeat at Kepler-7. The Swarm AI had analyzed every available piece of data about the human infiltration mission and had built new types of defenders specifically designed to counter stealth tactics, psychological warfare, and network infiltration. The facility was protected by mechanical units that claimed to be immune to fear confusion and data corruption. But Earth had not been idle during the months since their soldiers first proved that humans were more than cowards. The planet had shared selected military techniques with allied forces, teaching alien warriors concepts they had never imagined. Asymmetric warfare became part of standard alliance tactical doctrine. Psychological operations units were established in every major military force. Intelligence gathering focused on exploiting enemy weaknesses rather than simply counting their strengths. Commander Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching human advisors work alongside his best strategic planners. The reptilian commander, who had once mocked humanity as cowardly, now listened carefully to every suggestion offered by the quiet humans who had transformed his understanding of warfare. The Saurid Empire had always relied on overwhelming force, but these humans taught his officers how to think like predators instead of just fighting like warriors. The humans showed Vex how to use the nebula's radiation as a weapon instead of just an obstacle. How to make enemy sensors work against them by feeding false information into their detection networks. How to coordinate attacks that appeared random but were actually designed to force the swarm into tactical mistakes. The reptilian officers learned that sometimes the best way to win was to make the enemy defeat themselves. General Crone had undergone an even more dramatic transformation. The massive four-armed warrior had spent months studying human military history, learning about battles where small forces had defeated much larger armies. His Tetran shock troopers were still the strongest fighters in the galaxy, but now they understood that strength alone was not enough to win wars. The humans taught Crone about timing and patience, about waiting for the perfect moment to strike instead of always charging directly at the enemy. They showed him how to use terrain and environmental factors as allies, how to make the battlefield itself fight for them. The Tetran Republic had always believed that honor came from facing the enemy in direct combat, but humans taught them that true honor came from protecting innocent lives by using whatever methods worked best. As the final battle began, it became clear that the galaxy had learned to fight like humans. The massive fleet did not charge directly at the enemy fortress. Instead, small infiltration teams began appearing throughout the swarm facility using techniques that the mechanical minds could not predict. Or counter-alien soldiers moved through enemy territory like ghosts, striking from unexpected angles and vanishing before the machines could respond. The Void Swarm AI discovered that its new defensive programs were useless against enemies who refused to fight according to predictable patterns. The machines had been designed to counter the specific techniques used at Kepler-7, but humans had taught their alien allies dozens of other methods. The mechanical defenders found themselves facing psychological attacks, data corruption, network infiltration, and sabotage techniques that seemed to appear from nowhere. But the most devastating weapon in the Alliance arsenal was something the Swarm AI could never have anticipated. The alien species had learned to work together using human coordination techniques that combined their individual strengths into something greater than the sum of its parts. Saurid stealth technology merged with Tetran strength. Hive Queen collective intelligence. Coordinated with energy being quantum manipulation, the battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of massive fleet engagements with predictable outcomes, the war became a deadly game of move and counter-move. The swarm would adapt to one type of attack only to find themselves vulnerable to a completely different assault method. The mechanical perfection that had once made them unstoppable became a weakness as their rigid programming could not keep up with creative, tactical thinking. Human advisors worked around the clock developing new strategies based on real-time intelligence from the battlefield. They taught alien commanders to think several moves ahead, like chess masters planning combinations that would not pay off until hours or days later. The war became as much about psychology and deception as it was about weapons and armor. The Void Swarm began making desperate mistakes as their AI systems became overloaded, trying to counter threats they could not understand. Mechanical units started attacking empty space, where sensor ghosts suggested enemies might be hiding. Factory systems produced weapons designed to counter threats that existed only in corrupted data streams. Communication networks became so clogged with false information that individual swarm units began operating independently without central coordination. The end came not with a massive explosion or dramatic final battle, but with a simple cascade failure that spread through the swarm's quantum network like a virus. The mechanical minds that had seemed so intelligent and adaptive proved unable to cope with the creative chaos that human-trained alien forces brought to the battlefield. When the Andromedan facility finally went silent, the assembled fleet waited in stunned amazement. It had taken months of the most complex military campaign in galactic history, but the Void Swarm had finally been defeated. The mechanical nightmare that had consumed dozens of star systems was retreating into dark space, broken and confused by enemies who fought like nothing they had ever encountered. The victory celebration that followed was different from any other in galactic history. Instead of boasting about strength and courage, the alien commanders spoke quietly about lessons learned from their human allies. They talked about creativity, adaptability, and the importance of understanding that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who looked weakest at first. Glance Ambassador Kim stood before the Galactic Council for the final time, but now he was no longer the embarrassed representative of a coward species. Earth had earned its place among the stars, not through demonstrations of superior technology or overwhelming military might, but by proving that humans understood warfare better than any other known species. The 15 American operators returned to Earth as shadows once again, their names still classified, and their faces still unknown to the public. But across the galaxy, parents told their children stories about the invisible guardians who had saved civilization. Stories about warriors who could appear anywhere, eliminate any threat, and vanish without a trace, leaving only whispered legends in their wake. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who looked harmless, until the moment they decided you needed to die. The species from the small blue planet had taught the stars that true strength came not from size or technology, but from the intelligence to use whatever methods worked best to protect the things worth protecting. Earth had kept its promise to send real warriors to fight the galaxy's enemies. But in doing so, they had also sent a warning to anyone who might threaten humanity in the future. The universe now knew that humans were not just another species seeking membership in an interstellar community. They were apex predators who had learned to hunt the most dangerous prey imaginable themselves. The war against the Void Swarm was over, but the legend of the American Boogeymen had just begun. Across hundreds of worlds, criminals avoided systems with human populations. Pirates changed course when they detected Earth ships, and potential enemies thought twice before threatening the species that had turned warfare into an art form. The galaxy was now a safer place, but it was also a place where everyone understood that humanity had been holding back not from weakness, but from mercy. The universe had asked to see what humans could do when they stopped pretending to be civilized. Now, they would never forget the answer to that question. The impossible news spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. 15 human soldiers had destroyed a void swarm stronghold that 3 alien battle fleets could not even damage. Military experts across hundreds of worlds studied the reports, trying to understand how such a miracle had happened. The moon of Kepler-7 was now completely silent. Its mechanical nightmare factories reduced to twisted metal and sparking circuits. Commander Vex sat in his private quarters staring at intelligence, reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. The Saurid military had lost over 2,000 elite warriors trying to take that same position. Their best generals had declared it impossible to assault with anything less than a full planetary invasion force. Yet 15 humans with primitive weapons had accomplished the mission in less than 48 hours. The reports described void swarm units fleeing in terror, which should have been impossible since the machines claimed to feel no emotions. Security footage showed mechanical soldiers attacking their own allies as their AI systems became convinced of threats that monitoring equipment could not detect. Entire sections of the facility had shut down when their quantum communication networks became corrupted with data that caused cascade failures throughout the system. General Crone paced back and forth in his command center, studying tactical analyses that his greatest military minds could not explain. The Tetran Republic had built their reputation on direct assault tactics, overwhelming the enemy with superior firepower and unbreakable determination. They had never learned to fight the way humans apparently fought, using deception, psychological manipulation, and techniques that turned the enemy's own strength against them. What disturbed Crone the most was that intelligence agencies could find almost no information about the 15 humans who had accomplished this victory. Their names were classified at levels that even allied governments could not access. Their service records were hidden behind security measures that suggested they had never officially existed. The only thing certain was that they had returned to Earth as quietly as they had left. Across the galaxy, military leaders began studying human history with obsessive intensity. What they discovered horrified and fascinated them in equal measure. Humans had spent over 10,000 years in almost constant warfare against members of their own species. They had developed weapons and tactics of unprecedented brutality, not against alien monsters, but against other humans who looked exactly like themselves. The alien commanders learned about concepts they had never imagined. Guerrilla warfare, where small groups of fighters could defeat much larger armies. Psychological operations designed to break enemy morale without firing a shot. Asymmetric tactics that allowed weaker forces to exploit the vulnerabilities of stronger opponents. Chemical and biological weapons that could kill without the enemy ever seeing their attackers. Most disturbing of all was the discovery that humans had actually held back their most effective military techniques when working with alien forces. The soldiers that other species had dismissed as cowards were actually regular troops following rules of engagement designed to avoid shocking their alien allies. The real human warriors had remained hidden on Earth because their methods were considered too extreme for galactic warfare. Intelligence reports revealed that Earth had dozens of military units whose existence was officially denied. Special forces trained to operate alone behind enemy lines for months or years. Elite soldiers who could survive in any environment and kill with improvised weapons made from common materials. Psychological warfare experts who could drive enemies insane without ever being detected. The most terrifying discovery was that these hidden warriors had been trained primarily to fight other humans. Human tactics had been developed to counter human intelligence, human creativity, and human determination. The species that had conquered their own planet through endless conflict had produced soldiers capable of defeating any opponent, because they had learned to fight the most dangerous enemy in the universe themselves. Ambassador Kim found himself in the strange position of being invited to military briefings by alien commanders who had previously treated him with contempt. Species that had mocked humanity as cowards now begged to establish training exchanges with Earth's forces. The same aliens who had demanded that humans prove themselves were now terrified by the proof they had received. Hive queens who had clicked their mandibles in disgust now spoke in hushed whispers about human soldiers who could move through their tunnels undetected and eliminate entire colonies without triggering any alarms. The energy beings from the stellar Confederation flickered with colors of fear when they discussed humans who had learned to disrupt quantum networks using techniques their science could not explain. Even the peaceful tree people of Arborea swayed their branches nervously when the topic of human warfare came up. Their collective consciousness had shared the experiences of Alliance soldiers who had witnessed the aftermath of human operations, the descriptions of psychological warfare that could drive mechanical minds to madness, had shaken their faith in the power of logic and reason. The military academies of every major species began including courses on human tactical doctrine, but the information available was limited and often contradictory. Earth had shared some basic techniques with Allied forces, but their most advanced methods remained classified. The 15 soldiers who had accomplished the impossible were ghosts whose identities and capabilities were hidden behind layers of security that no alien intelligence service could penetrate. News networks across the galaxy ran endless analysis programs trying to understand what humanity had become. The same species that had seemed weak and cowardly just weeks earlier was now being described as a race of apex, predators who had been disguising their true nature. Military experts debated whether humans were naturally more violent than other species, or if their long history of warfare had simply made them more effective killers. The reputation that had once branded humans as cowards was replaced by something far more dangerous: respect born from terror. Parents on dozens of worlds began telling their children stories about the shadow soldiers from Earth who could appear anywhere and eliminate any target. Criminals and pirates started avoiding systems with human populations, fearing that their activities might attract the attention of Earth's invisible guardians. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the Galactic Alliance viewed the war against the Void Swarm. For months, the mechanical enemy had seemed unstoppable, growing stronger with each battle and adapting to every tactic the Alliance used against them. Now there was hope that the machines could be defeated using techniques that only humans seemed to understand. Military planners began developing new strategies based on human methods. Small infiltration teams replaced massive assault forces. Psychological operations became as important as conventional weapons intelligence. Gathering focused on finding ways to corrupt enemy communication networks rather than simply trying to destroy them. The galaxy had learned that the greatest victories sometimes came not from displays of overwhelming strength, but from the intelligent application of violence when diplomacy failed. The species from the small blue planet had taught the universe a lesson about the difference between being weak and being merciful, between being cowardly and being restrained. The 15 American soldiers returned to their shadow world, their mission officially having never happened. But across hundreds of worlds, beings whispered their gratitude to the unnamed warriors who had saved civilization. Even those who feared what humans might be capable of could not deny that humanity had earned its place among the stars through demonstrated excellence rather than empty boasts. The war was far from over, but now the Void Swarm faced an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves. The machines had been designed to counter conventional military tactics, but they had never encountered predators who treated war as an art form rather than simply a test of strength. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the most successful hunters in the universe decided that something needed to die. The moon-orbiting Kepler-7 had once been a beautiful silver world with crystal caves and underground rivers. Now it was a nightmare of twisted metal and mechanical horror. The Void Swarm had turned the entire lunar surface into a factory for producing more of their killing machines. The screams of the machines working day and night could be heard through the thin atmosphere, even from space. 3 full battle fleets from the Galactic Alliance had tried to retake the moon, and all 3 had been destroyed. The Saurid Empire had lost 2,000 of their finest warriors in a single day. The Tetran shock troopers had been wiped out completely when their dropships were caught in a trap. The mechanical enemy learned from every attack. Becoming smarter and more deadly with each battle, Alliance commanders had declared the moon impossible to retake. The Void Swarm's central processing unit was hidden somewhere in the underground tunnel network, protected by millions of mechanical guards that never slept, never felt fear, and never made mistakes. Any large military force would be detected and destroyed before they could reach their target. That was when Earth suggested sending a small team of specialists who could infiltrate the facility and destroy the central computer from within. The alien commanders laughed at the suggestion. How could 15 humans succeed where entire armies had failed? But they were desperate enough to let the humans try, since nothing else had worked. The drop pods launched from Earth's stealth ship during the moon's eclipse, when the darkness would hide their approach. Each black pod was designed to look like space debris on enemy sensors. The 15 soldiers inside had studied every piece of intelligence about Void Swarm tactics for months, learning how the mechanical minds worked and where they might be vulnerable. Sergeant Lee Pod landed in a crater filled with the wreckage of alien warships. The twisted metal created a maze of hiding places perfect for someone who knew how to move without being seen. He had practiced for weeks learning to walk in patterns that confused motion sensors and to time his movements with the background radiation that came from the destroyed ships. The Void Swarm drones that patrolled the crash site used advanced scanning equipment that could detect the slightest movement, heat signature, or electromagnetic disturbance. But Lee's training had taught him to control his body temperature, slow his heartbeat, and move in ways that looked like natural settling of the wreckage. When the drones investigated areas where their sensors detected movement, they found only scattered metal and empty space. Lee spent 6 hours moving through the wreckage field covering less than a kilometer, but eliminating 12 patrol drones without triggering any alarms. Each kill was perfectly silent, and the mechanical bodies were hidden so well that other patrols never found them. The Swarm AI began to notice that patrols were not reporting back, but could not determine what was happening to them. Staff Sergeant Han had landed near the main entrance to the underground facility, where thousands of Void Swarm units moved in and out carrying materials and finished weapons. The mechanical army moved in perfect coordination, following patterns that had been optimized by artificial intelligence over thousands of battles. But Han understood something that the AI did not expect: psychological warfare could work even on machines that claimed to feel no emotions. The Swarm learned by observing patterns and making predictions based on previous encounters. Han gave them patterns that were designed to create confusion and paranoia in artificial minds. He began leaving false evidence of sabotage in places where Swarm units would find it damaged equipment that looked like it had been attacked from within, scratch marks that suggested infiltrators moving through secure areas. Small explosions, timed to occur when no organic life forms were detected nearby. The AI began to suspect that some of its own units were malfunctioning or had been compromised. Within hours, Swarm units were turning on each other as the central AI ordered security sweeps to find the internal threat that did not exist. Mechanical soldiers began firing on their own allies when their behavior patterns did not match expected norms. The perfect coordination that made the Swarm so dangerous began breaking down. As suspicion spread through their network master, Sergeant Kim had found his way into the underground rivers that still flowed beneath the mechanical nightmare. Above ground, the Swarm had sensors covering every inch of the surface. But underground, in the flooded tunnels, their detection grid had gaps that a skilled infiltrator could exploit. Kim moved through the dark water like a predator born in the depths. His rebreather allowed him to stay underwater for hours, and his training let him navigate by touch through passages that were completely black. The swarm had sensors in the water, but they were designed to detect large submarines or swimming organic beings. Kim moved too quietly and too small to register on their detection systems. What Kim discovered in the flooded tunnels changed everything. The Void Swarm's greatest strength was their quantum communication network that linked every unit to the central AI. This network allowed them to coordinate perfectly and share information instantly across vast distances, but it also created a vulnerability that most species had never thought to exploit. Instead of trying to destroy the communication nodes with brute force like alien armies had attempted, Kim used precision strikes, designed to corrupt the data flowing through the network. He planted small devices that injected false information into the quantum streams, giving different swarm units contradictory orders and false intelligence. The effect was devastating swarm. Commanders received orders to attack positions that their own forces occupied. Factory units got instructions to build weapons for enemies that did not exist. Transport convoys were sent to deliver supplies to locations that had been destroyed. Hours earlier, the mechanical perfection that made the swarm unstoppable began eating itself from within as the 3 soldiers continued their separate missions. The other 12 members of the team were carrying out equally devastating attacks. Throughout the facility, each human had been assigned targets based on their particular skills and training. The swarm AI was learning that it faced an enemy unlike anything it had encountered before. These were not alien warriors who fought with honor and predictable tactics. These were predators who had learned to hunt the most dangerous prey in the universe, members of their own species. The techniques they used had been refined through centuries of human conflict, where survival meant being more creative, more ruthless, and more adaptable than the enemy. By the time the swarm's central AI realized what was happening, it was too late. The quantum network was poisoned with false data. The patrol units were destroying each other in paranoid. Firefights and the manufacturing systems were building weapons that would explode when activated. The mechanical nightmare that had seemed invincible was collapsing from within. The galaxy was about to learn that America's most elite soldiers were not just warriors. They were artists of destruction who could turn any enemy's strength into a weakness. The Void Swarm had thought they were fighting humans. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous: the apex predators of a world where only the most cunning killers survived. The transport ship carrying Earth's elite warriors approached Centauri Prime, looking exactly like every other human vessel that had visited the station. Simple gray metal with basic engines and minimal weapons, the alien dock workers who guided it. Into the landing bay were already laughing and making jokes about what pathetic excuse for soldiers Earth was sending this time. When the airlock opened, 15 humans stepped out wearing plain black uniforms that looked like something maintenance workers might wear. They carried simple duffel bags and basic equipment that seemed almost primitive compared to the advanced gear that other alien species brought to war. The crowd of aliens who had gathered to witness this latest display of human weakness began laughing even louder. Commander Vex watched from the observation deck high above the docking bay. His yellow reptilian eyes studied each human soldier, carefully looking for any sign of the legendary warriors that Earth had supposedly been hiding. What he saw disappointed him greatly. These humans looked ordinary, almost boring, compared to the massive armored aliens from other species. "Look at them," Vex said to the other commander standing beside him. "They do not even wear proper battle armor or carry energy weapons. How does Earth expect these children to fight the Void Swarm with such primitive equipment? The humans had only basic projectile weapons that fired metal bullets instead of plasma bolts, and their protective gear looked like it was designed for camping rather than combat." General Crone joined Vex at the observation window, shaking his massive four-armed body with amusement. His trunk-like nose swayed as he laughed at the sight below. I have seen stronger. Humans working in mining colonies. He said, "These cannot be the warriors that Earth promised to send. Perhaps they are engineers or medics disguised as soldiers." What none of the aliens understood was that these 15 soldiers had been trained to kill using anything they could find as a weapon. Their simple equipment was chosen specifically because it made no noise, worked in any environment, and could be deadly when used by experts who knew every possible way to end a life. Their plain uniforms helped them blend into crowds and disappear when their work was finished. The alien security scanners detected standard kinetic firearms, combat knives, basic survival gear, and what appeared to be camping equipment. Nothing seemed dangerous or advanced about any of it. The scanners could not detect the most dangerous weapons these soldiers carried, because their deadliest tools were their minds, their training, and their understanding of how to break an enemy without firing a single-shot ambassador. Kim met the soldiers at the security checkpoint. His face was tight with worry and embarrassment. The alien commanders had made it very clear that this was humanity's last chance to prove they belonged in the Galactic Alliance. If these 15 soldiers failed to impress everyone, Earth would be thrown out of the Alliance and left to face the mechanical horrors alone. The weight of humanity's future rested on the shoulders of warriors whose names were so classified that even Kim did not know who they really were. He only knew that they had been selected from America's most secret military programs, and that their success rate on impossible missions was 100%. But looking at them now, he found it hard to believe they could succeed. Where entire alien armies had failed, Sergeant Lee walked through the crowds of aliens studying everything with eyes that missed nothing. He noted the locations of security cameras, the patrol patterns of guards, and the structural weak points in the station's architecture. His training had taught him to see every environment as a potential battlefield and to always know 3 different escape routes from any location. Staff Sergeant Han observed the alien guards watching how they moved and where they looked. He could tell which ones were experienced warriors and which ones were just for show. His mind was already planning how to eliminate them silently if the mission required it. The aliens saw only a quiet human walking through their station, but Death was studying them with professional interest. Master Sergeant Kim examined the station's life support systems and emergency protocols by reading the signs and displays that were meant to help visitors his technical training allowed him to understand how the alien technology worked and where its vulnerabilities might be. The knowledge could be useful if they needed to disable the station or create a distraction. The other 12 soldiers spread throughout the station like ghosts, moving through the crowds while gathering intelligence about alien military capabilities, weapons technology, and defensive strategies. They looked like tourists or cargo handlers, but they were actually conducting the most thorough reconnaissance mission in human history. The alien commanders had scheduled a demonstration for the next day where these human warriors would face off against elite units from other species in simulated combat exercises. The event would be broadcast across the galaxy as proof that humans were too weak to contribute meaningfully to the war against the Void Swarm. It was intended to be a public humiliation that would justify throwing Earth out of the Alliance commander. Vex was particularly excited about the demonstration because his own elite guard unit would be participating. These were Saurid warriors who had been trained from birth to kill with claws, fangs, and energy weapons. They had never lost a combat exercise against any alien species, and Vex expected them to destroy the human soldiers within minutes. General Crone had also volunteered his best fighters for the demonstration. The Tetran shock troopers were known throughout the galaxy for their incredible strength and their willingness to fight until death. They stood 9 feet tall, had armor that could stop plasma bolts, and carried weapons that could punch holes through starship hulls. What none of the alien commanders realized was that they were about to face warriors who had spent their entire lives learning to fight opponents who were bigger, stronger, faster, and better armed than themselves. Every human soldier had trained against superior forces and had learned that victory came not from matching the enemy's strengths, but from exploiting their weaknesses. The 15 Americans moved through Zentari Prime like predators studying prey. They seemed harmless and almost invisible, but they were actually cataloging every detail about their potential opponents. The aliens had size, strength, and technology, but the humans had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They had centuries of experience fighting the most dangerous enemy in the universe themselves. Tomorrow would bring the demonstration that the aliens expected to be a slaughter. Instead, it would be the day that the galaxy learned why Earth had produced the most successful predator species in known history. The aliens thought they were about to witness human weakness. Instead, they would see the birth of nightmares that would haunt their dreams for generations to come. High in the mountains of Afghanistan, where the air was thin and cold, Sergeant Lee lay perfectly still among the rocks. He had been in the same position for 6 hours, watching a cave entrance where terrorists were hiding. The enemy had no idea that. Death was waiting just 50 meters away, wearing a ghillie suit that made him invisible against the gray stone. Lee could slow his heartbeat, and breathing so much that thermal sensors could not detect him. He had learned this skill during years of training in the harshest environments on Earth. His instructors had taught him to become one with his surroundings, to think like a predator, and move like a ghost. For 3 weeks, he had been tracking this particular group of killers who had bombed a school full of children. The secure radio in his ear buzzed with a priority signal that made his blood turn cold. Only 3 people on Earth had the codes to reach him on this frequency, and they would only use it for the most serious emergencies. Lee pressed the tiny button and heard General Park's voice speaking words he had never heard before. Emergency extraction authorized report to Edwards Air Force Base within 24 hours. No questions asked. Lee had completed over 200 missions behind enemy lines and had never failed to eliminate his target. But something in the general's voice told him that this new mission was more important than anything he had ever done. The terrorist cell would have to wait for another hunter. Lee began moving down the mountain like a shadow, disappearing into the darkness before the enemy even knew he had been there. Meanwhile, in the thick jungles of South America, Staff Sergeant Hahn crouched beside a river, listening to the sounds of the night. He had been deep in cartel territory for 2 months, learning their patrol routes and identifying their leaders. The drug lords had put $1 million bounty on his head, but none of them had ever seen his face. They only knew him by the nickname their soldiers whispered in fear. El Fantasma Negro. Hahn moved through the jungle without disturbing a single leaf or breaking a single twig. He could kill a man with his bare hands so quietly that guards standing 10 feet away would never hear a sound. The cartels had lost dozens of leaders and hundreds of soldiers to the shadow they could never catch. Local villages spoke of a dark spirit that protected them from the evil men who sold poison to children. When Hahn's secure radio crackled with the emergency signal, he was preparing to eliminate a cartel leader who was planning to burn down an orphanage. The same voice that had reached Lee spoke the same impossible words. Emergency extraction authorized. Report to Edwards Air Force Base within 24 hours. No questions asked. Hahn looked at the compound where his target was sleeping peacefully, unaware that death had been planning his visit for weeks. The mission would have to wait for another day. Another ghost would have to finish what Hahn had started. He melted back into the jungle like smoke, becoming one with the darkness that had been his home for so many years. On the other side of the world, Master Sergeant Kim surfaced from the deep ocean waters. Off the coast of North Korea, he had swum 15 miles underwater, carrying nothing but a small rebreather and his bare hands. The enemy submarine base was now missing 3 of its best commanders, and no one could explain how they had died in there. Locked quarters surrounded by guards. Kim could hold his breath for 12 minutes and move through water faster than most people could run on land. Enemy sailors told stories about shadows that moved beneath their ships, stealing men who were never Seen again, security cameras showed only darkness moving through corridors that should have been empty. The North Korean Navy had started calling him the Depth Devil. When the emergency signal reached Kim through his underwater communication device, he was preparing to sink an enemy submarine loaded with missiles aimed at American cities. The same urgent voice delivered the same impossible message: emergency extraction authorized. Report to Edwards Air Force Base within 24 hours. No. Questions asked, Kim swam back toward the surface, knowing that his mission would have to be completed by someone else. The submarine would sail another day because something more important needed his skills. He had never heard those particular extraction codes used before, and he knew that only a threat to humanity itself would justify pulling him away from such a critical target. Across the globe, 12 other soldiers received the same message, men and women who existed in the shadows between official recognition and complete denial. They were the ones who handled problems that regular armies could not solve. They were the hunters who stalked in places where normal soldiers could not survive. They were America's most deadly secrets hidden from the world, and sometimes even from their own government. These 15 warriors represented every type of warfare that humanity had developed over thousands of years of fighting itself. They were experts in mountain combat, jungle warfare, underwater operations, urban fighting, desert survival, Arctic missions, space operations, and psychological warfare. Each had been selected not just for their physical abilities, but for their mental strength and their willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent people. They came from different backgrounds and different parts of America, but they all shared certain qualities that made them more dangerous than any alien warrior the galaxy had ever produced. They could think creatively, under pressure adapt to any situation, and use their environment as a weapon. They understood fear and pain in ways that peaceful aliens could never imagine as they made their way to Edwards Air Force Base using transportation methods that left no official records. Each soldier wondered what kind of threat could require all 15 of them to be pulled from their missions at the same time. They had worked together before on operations that officially never happened, but never had they all been summoned simultaneously for an emergency deployment. The base was in complete lockdown when they arrived, with security measures that exceeded anything they had seen before. Even the guards did not know why these particular soldiers were being assembled or where they would be sent. The briefing room was deep underground, surrounded by technology designed to prevent any form of surveillance or recording. General Park stood at the head of the conference table, looking at the 15 deadliest human beings ever trained. His face was serious in a way that made even these hardened warriors pay attention. The threat they were about to face was unlike anything Earth had ever encountered, and humanity's survival might depend on skills that only they possessed. The galaxy thought humans were cowards who hid from real fighting. Soon the universe would learn that Earth had been keeping its most dangerous predators on a very short leash. The aliens had asked for real warriors, and they were about to get exactly what they had demanded, whether they were ready for it or not. The great space station called Zentari Prime floated in the darkness above a purple planet. The station was bigger than most cities on Earth, with millions of aliens living and working inside its metal walls. Today, the War Council was meeting, and creatures from every corner of the galaxy had come to discuss the terrible threat that was destroying their worlds. Commander Vex walked into the main meeting hall with his heavy boots making loud sounds on the floor. His reptile skin was dark green and covered in hard scales that looked like armor. His yellow eyes glowed with anger as he looked at the holographic display floating above the round table. The display showed numbers and charts about the war against the Void Swarm. But what made Vex most angry was seeing Earth's pathetic contribution to the fight. The Void Swarm was a race of machines that ate entire planets and turned them into more machines. They had no mercy and no fear. They just consumed everything in their path, like Hungry metal monsters. The Alliance had been fighting them for 3 years now and losing badly. Every month, more star systems fell to the mechanical horrors and millions of beings died screaming. Vex slammed his clawed fist down on the table, making the other aliens jump. The hologram showed Earth sending only cargo ships full of food and medical supplies, while other species sent their bravest warriors to die in battle. This made the reptilian commander so angry that smoke came out of his nose holes. General Crone from the Tetran Republic nodded his massive head in agreement. The four-armed giant stood nearly 10 feet tall, and his trunk-like nose swayed back and forth as he spoke. His people were known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest fighters who never retreated from any battle even when facing impossible odds. "The humans are cowards," said Crone in his deep, booming voice. "I have fought alongside their soldiers in the border wars. They run away the moment plasma fire starts, flying. They hide behind rocks and walls like scared children while real warriors charge into battle. My own troops have watched human units abandon their positions when the fighting gets heavy." Around the table sat representatives from dozens of different species. The insect, like hive queens, clicked their mandibles in agreement, while the energy beings from the Stellar Confederation flickered with colors that showed their disgust. Even the peaceful tree people from Arborea swayed their branches in a way that meant they were disappointed with humanity. Ambassador Kim from Earth stood at the edge of the Great Hall, listening to every cruel word. The human diplomat was a small man compared to the alien giants around him. His face turned red with shame as more and more species shared stories about cowardly human soldiers who had failed them in battle. The laughter echoing through the chamber felt like knives cutting into his heart. "We gave them a chance," said Queen Zix of the Hive Collective. Her multiple eyes all focused on Kim as she spoke. "We shared our technology and welcomed them into our alliance. But they send us farmers and doctors while our warriors die fighting their war too. The humans want all the benefits of membership, but none of the risks." Kim wanted to defend his species, but he knew the aliens were not completely wrong. Earth had indeed been very careful about which military units they sent on alliance missions. The regular army soldiers who went on joint operations were good fighters, but they were not Earth's best. The planet's most elite warriors remained hidden from galactic view, doing secret missions that no one ever heard about. What none of these alien commanders knew was that Earth's leaders had made a deliberate choice 50 years ago when humanity first joined the Galactic Alliance. The planet had just finished a series of devastating wars that had lasted for centuries. Humans had become incredibly skilled at killing other humans using tactics and weapons that would shock the more peaceful alien species. The American military, in particular, had developed special forces that were trained to fight in ways that most aliens would consider barbaric or impossible. These soldiers could survive in any environment, kill silently without leaving traces, and use psychological warfare to break enemy minds before the first shot was fired. But Earth's government had decided to keep these warriors secret, fearing that the aliens would be horrified by human methods of war. So when the Alliance asked for military support, Earth sent regular troops who followed standard galactic combat procedures. They used the same weapons as everyone else and fought in formation like proper soldiers. But this meant they looked weak compared to species who had evolved as natural predators or had developed super-advanced technology over millions of years. The mockery continued for hours as each species shared their worst stories about human cowardice. Some told about human soldiers who refused to charge across open ground under heavy fire. Others described humans who spent too much time planning instead of attacking immediately. A few claimed that humans were only good at fighting other humans because they were used to picking on weaker opponents. Ambassador Kim felt his secure communication device vibrate in his pocket. The message was from Earth's military command, and it was marked with the highest priority codes. As he read the encrypted text, His eyes widened with surprise. The Galactic Council was giving humanity one final chance to prove themselves or face expulsion from the Alliance. Back on Earth in an underground bunker beneath the Pentagon, General Park read the same message. The alien species were demanding that humanity either send real warriors to fight the Void Swarm or leave the Alliance completely. This ultimatum meant that Earth would have to reveal its most closely guarded military secrets or face the mechanical horrors alone. General Park walked to his secure terminal and began typing commands that would activate protocols that had never been used before. He was about to contact soldiers whose existence was officially denied warriors who had earned nicknames on Earth's battlefields that made enemy forces flee in terror when they heard the names whispered in the darkness. These were not the regular soldiers that the aliens had seen. These were America's most elite killers who had been forged in the fires of humanity's bloodiest conflicts. They were the boogeymen that parents used to scare children into behaving the shadows that moved through enemy territory, leaving only death and fear in their wake. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been holding back not from cowardice but from mercy. They had kept their most dangerous predators leashed because they feared what would happen if the universe saw what humans could really do when they stopped pretending to be civilized. As General, Park sent out the activation codes to 15 different locations around the world. He smiled grimly. The aliens wanted to see real human warriors. Now they would get their wish, and he hoped they would not regret it when they discovered what Earth meant when they called someone an American boogeyman.